Thank you, Ian. Just kind of pausing on what's happened so far this morning. I mean, there was a very deliberate attempt to, I think, set the scene through the Minister's thoughts, go to 30,000 feet in terms of Housing Australia and have some level of optimism, but then really look at who's being harmed and where we possibly are. I think to take anything from Minister Champion and from Scott this morning, it's not do one thing, it's do everything, and it's not do things later, it's do everything now. So we've got 43 minutes to fix this, and here are the here are the three. As I try to phrase it, who is choosing what we're building, who's funding what we're building, and who can build faster what it is that we're building. Task one's going to be anyone else getting a word in, but so Maria. I'd quite like my old photo back, to be honest. Jesus, how nice is that? Anyway, let's start with optimism.
Yes.
We've worked in a sector where there's been no money and little hope. There's now enormous amount of money, but we're playing catch up. How hard or easy is it to stay optimistic with the size of the challenge in front of us?
Look, it's an overwhelming thing, and I think you're right. We have to all be coming at this together at multiple fronts, at every level of government, private sector, not-for-profit, government, and not actually competing with one another, but properly working together. One of the things that excites me the most is the change of the product that's being... it's just the ball's rolling now. So when you talk about what Scott's doing, to understand what he's doing is he's creating a new asset class of rental housing that is not a mum and dad investor class, and it's not a wealth creation class, right? And the problem with rental housing, it's a wealth creation asset class, which means that mum and dads don't want you to put a pet in there, don't want you to wreck it for them, and want you to move on really quickly because they want to liquidate it when they want to liquidate it. What this asset class is, it's not just about the affordability of it, it's the longevity of it. They're saying to us, this asset class is not about sale, this is about keeping it and having enough money where we can attract different sorts of capital, not taxpayers' money, but different sorts of capital. We're able to fund that capital with a top-up payment that's provided by Scott, and then we keep it indefinitely as long-term housing. That means that for us to make money in that model, people have to stay there. Don't move, stay there, and to the point where this asset class will be the equivalent of home ownership for those that won't get into home ownership. It is the missing middles way of saying, okay, in Europe we know that there's asset classes where people can stay there forever. This is the kind of housing where you can stay there forever, we want you to. The other element to that, and the reason why it's so important, is that we're able to actively manage that housing. The reason why we have high density housing or apartments whereby you have the community saying you're putting the wrong people in, they don't behave well, it's a bit of a disaster, it gets on the paper, is because we actually under-resource the management of that, because we weren't focusing on community, we were focusing on individuals and prioritising individuals getting into that housing and not thinking about what that means for the community and not actively managing that. So this model enables all of those things to happen that we lost with the Housing Trust and public housing. Thank you so much.
James, in a national context, I mean, you're Adelaide boy done good who's gone away, and thank you so much for being here. It's also a reality where 7% of what the national share is. East Coast challenges are very different to South Australia. How does South Australia keep pace with the national change that you're seeing in your business and how your business has changed over time? And how do we make sure those national smarts have a South Australian benefit?
Well, just firstly on photo, I think that's about 15 years old, that one of me. So
Mine's recent.
It looks like it's in Adelaide. So how long ago was that?
I think 13 years ago. Yeah. So I'll definitely get that updated. I think from a South Australian perspective, it's not really its own challenge. This is a national problem. When you look at where investors are looking to invest, diversity is an important thing, and that means investment in South Australia, right across the East Coast and even on the Western Coast as well. So I don't see it as having its own unique challenges. I think the challenge is scale. Scott touched on we need 290 billion. That's a very, very big number, but we're not even touching the sides of that. And I think the 290 billion is a big number, but institutional investors in the Australian market have 2.9 trillion. So finding scale opportunities for them nationally in disaggregated assets, which housing is what's important.
Wayne, you've worked all over the world and chosen to reside back here. Scale is probably a helpful starting point for what you're trying to achieve and what you've learned in the last couple of years.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Fourth continent I've lived and worked on. Pleased to say my family and I are now entirely Australians, been here 17 years, 7 of those here in Adelaide. Five North, as a prefabricated off-site manufacturer, requires scale to make that work. But in delivering that, you're able to then drive costs down. There's a lot of tailwinds in the marketplace now for our purpose, which is, you've heard us talk about it many times, everyone deserves an address. We commit half of our capacity to social and affordable homes, and so it's wonderful to hear a groundswell of collaboration in those outcomes for us. We know in the South Australian context, the industry can produce about 10,800 to 11,000 homes a year. We have federal commitments to 15,000 homes a year, and to quote one of the former speakers, we have no idea how we're going to get there. So we need some innovation, we need some change to drive that scale.
In terms of in a broader sense, and whomever wants to take this question up, there are headwinds in the residential construction sector as we currently are. Every kind of economic debate in a South Australia sense, we have kind of 3 mega projects which are once in a decade projects happening at once, let alone what's going to happen after that in an AUKUS sense. In the broader skills debate, how is what we are trying to achieve remaining relevant in that and not being the kind of fall guy at the bottom end? Wayne, do you want to go first?
So the blunt answer is residential construction, and part of what we all do is in that space, is always the poor cousin. So when there's investment in infrastructure, they're drawing off at least a large overlap of the same pool of resources. We can't afford to drive build costs in the same way and pay people more when they can get that at infrastructure projects, for example. So we think that this is dumb, and we are investing in robots to solve that problem.
Maria?
Yeah, look, I think that is absolutely going to be a problem for acting like we're in a crisis, as the minister said. You know, we're in a crisis. Who?
As he stole from David Reynolds.
Reynolds says. But the thing about this concept of, let's act like we're in a crisis, we're in a system that will not let us act like we're in a crisis. The 2 reasons that we have had choked supply in this country, and the reason we have a high cost of living, and the reason we have a housing crisis, is because of compliance. It's not about immigrants coming in, because I know builders and I know developers, and they would absolutely build enough houses for those immigrants coming in, plus some. Because you know what? They buy houses and developers make money, and they would have made money and they would have supplied that housing. The reason they couldn't is they got choked out. And how they got choked out was compliance, that just went on and on and on, which meant the cost of building and the time it takes to get a house on the ground kept blowing out. And this is a problem with this country. We are losing productivity because of compliance, and you see it everywhere. So what happens with residential housing now, we have this compliance problem. So 30% of the cost of a house is just compliance, red tape, right? Then you talk about the time it takes to get a house on the ground. We're up to 2 years now. Shouldn't be 2 years, but that's how long it takes to get through all those compliance hoops, because none of them coordinate, they're all siloed, and it takes forever. So how do we figure that out is probably our first bit. But in residential housing, because we have a competition with labour, technology is our only way through. And technology in the manufacturing is we have to go there and fast, because we don't have the labour and we can't compete with civil infrastructure projects. The second thing is IA, because the thing about compliance, we can't go back now, right? But what did I say?
AI.
I'm so dyslexic.
Wasn't quite sure where you were going there.
AI has to be the next solution for this. The other one. What was that? I mean then. No, AI has to be the solution and the fast solution to this compliance time problem, because the fact is that every single bit of that time there are people literally tripping over themselves, changing and moving paper that we could solve with technology that we are now seeing coming on board so quickly, and I can see already, even in my own business, with lots of examples, how I can actually start to remove whole roles that spend ages figuring out paperwork that has it automated. So they're the two things I think we're going to focus on so hard and fast. That's the crisis bit that we have to drive really hard in our businesses.
Wayne, whilst we're talking about what does good look like, what are the international experiences of how quickly scale can be built in kind of, similar economies when there is the, pipeline that the Minister was talking to?
Do you mind if I refer to the trip we made together?
Go your hardest.
So Matt and I had the pleasure, for the most part, spending a lot of time together, more for me than for you, I think, Matt. In November, we left Adelaide on a Sunday. We got to the UK on a Monday. We spent time on a construction site on Tuesday. At that particular construction site, typical sort of English homes, row houses, 2 levels, 2-bedders. The development was 200-odd homes. When we were touring the site, 78 of them were already tenanted. This is November 20. And they'd taken the site, so they'd started to turn the dirt in July that year. So 78 homes were complete and moved in 5 months. We then left the UK on the Wednesday, went to the US, toured the factory. Friday we were in San Francisco. In San Francisco, social and affordable development, 6 levels, 136 units, 2 and 3 bed apartments, some studio, soil to keys, 12 months. That's the difference. And so to your point, if you're going to drive scale and cost as a result, you need to be faster, and only technology is going to get us there.
I might just add to that. It is technology, but it's also compliance, right? From an investor's perspective, you can go and buy stuff on the stock market tomorrow, right? You might want to think twice with Trump doing what he's doing, but if you're facing a 2-year or a 12-month planning process, then a 12 to 18-month build process, it's just too hard. I'll just go do something easy, right? Something that's established. So, I mean, we like playing in places where others won't, but speed to capital deployment is so important for investors, and certainty as well.
And I mean, for those others in the room, James, the scale of the work that you've done and the kind of overlay with existing community housing providers, how has a pipeline allowed you to scale to be partner ready, I guess?
Well, we've got about 500 million of assets under management across specialist disability accommodation and key worker housing, or affordable housing, ultimately. The beauty of the community housing sector, Mark and its participants, is they're the biggest landlords in the country, right? That they know what they're doing. Everyone that's talking about build to rent as a new investment sector and all this sort of stuff, they're starting fresh. They've all got startups. So we like working with the community housing sector because they've got the experience. They've got the, even though you're going to replace a bunch of people with machines, Maria, those people do know, how to manage not only people with sensitive needs, but that's not the majority, right? They know how to look after, they know how to make sure issues are responded to, whether it be maintenance and that sort of thing. So for us, partnering with that sector is going to be a consistent theme. I do think the market will rationalise, particularly as private sector capital comes in. We're seeing it on the institutional capital side with institutional investors all merging, which only makes their problem of capital deployment bigger. So every time they do something, they want it to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think the same thing will happen with community housing providers. I'm not always popular for saying that, but...
No, but it also needs to be said. Maria, I was going to say honest answer, but there's no real other way, is there? Whilst the opportunity's in front of the sector, I don't think anyone's pretending that the capability is there. I mean, there's some big steps within the sector to be capable of doing the task that's in front of us.
Yeah, it is an absolute issue that we need to work through. So just like everyone else, the competition for quality, capability in development is fierce. We have a shortage of everything. It's not just a trade shortage in skilled labour, like professional people that are really good at project management, development management, finance management, and all the elements that you need. Oh my God, we're fighting for them. We're fighting for each other. And so we generally don't, we have a pressure to get housing on the ground. I mean, but we're all stealing from each other, the high quality stuff. And then the prices that they're charging us for those short staff are pretty eye-watering as well. But it all adds to costs, right? So again, AI, no, I'm going to stop going on about AI. But yeah, it is absolutely the biggest thing that we think about. Scale is needed to attract the type of investment that we need. We're talking scale. When we say scale, we're talking 1,000 at a time. Do you know how hard it is to jump from me currently? Like, I've gone from building 70 houses a year to 200 a year. Now I've got to jump to 1,000 to get to not even like make a dent. So the capability and capacity thing, it's also sort of the financial capacity of being able to push stuff out so early, and, the Housing Trust is working hard, Renewal SA is working hard, community housing providers are working hard, but we're all competing with each other for these really scarce resources. So yes, it's the answer to that. We're really thinking hard about it, but it is partnerships. So I am not going to pretend that we're going to build these things. The partnerships with the development sector and builders is now everything. The builders don't really understand us. They think we're competition, but what we are is that we're the stability in their industry, because where the market gets volatile, once we've got the pipeline established with scale capital, we can create stability in that industry by bringing them to the table. Say, let's not fight for resources. Let's project by project work together on pooling our resources and making it more efficient.
I think Scott spoke before about, genuinely people playing their right role, and whether it's your right role in risk or your right role in delivery. I think that goes to that same point. James, are we getting better at it? Are we getting better to people finding their right place in the ecosystem rather than everyone get excited about shiny pictures and chasing the cool stuff?
Well, I was just going to touch on that exact point that Maria made. I mean, the Housing Australia Future Fund is a fantastic initiative, right? But it's not enough. 70 homes to 200 to 1,000. That's what's needed for dealing with the challenge that we face. But again, speaking my own book, that's what's needed for private sector capital. I think the problem that private sector capital saw with the HAF funding round one at scale, and when we say institutional capital, these are hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that we're talking about. The big challenge there was they looked at that program and said, it's just too small, right? IFM came out and said, we're going to, Wayne Swan's telling us we have to do it because Chalmers is telling us we have to do it. They didn't do anything. Why? Because it was too small. The one thing the HAF did do was, deliver probably a lot of new pools in lawyers' backyards as well. So we need to create efficiency.
Largely from one firm.
Yeah. We need to create efficiency within capital markets that is based on replicating and being able to do it over and over and over again. And that's with community housing providers, with developers, with builders, and ideally not rely on government too much.
Wayne, two parts to this question. Your observations on the sector's desire to collaborate, probably firstly, and then secondly, a growing recognition that this affordable/social space is a larger and more relevant part of the broader market residential sector.
Yeah, I think, so I'll get to those two in a second. I think just to touch on both. So, touch on both comments earlier. At any point, if you are accelerating through compliance or accelerating through your build cycle, that gives capital the opportunity to be churned more often. So you can leverage that up off the same pool, which where you're living in a world of finite capital means you can get more outcomes more quickly off that same pool. That's really important, I think, to comment on. So observations of the sector generally. I think it aligns very, very closely with my values, my family's values, so it's a place that I just naturally gravitate to. But at the same time, you have to provide decent risk-adjusted returns to make it all work. The way for us to do that is to use technology to drive input costs down. That means that we can make decisions as private owners of the business to commit half of our output to the sector. Does the sector have enough output to give us the confidence? More than enough. There's, to Maria's point, that's one example of a large tier one community housing provider having to go from 70 to 1,000 in, I don't know, no time at all. And so, the challenges of that are in and of themselves a problem. But from a sector point of view, I think the community housing providing sector, the social and affordable housing sector understand the challenges far better than I do. I'm looking to play a role to support their outcomes, both from a input cost and a speed perspective, but also certainty. We know when stuff will come off the line. We can tell you every 34 square metres every 8 minutes, for example.
Okay. We've got 20 minutes to go before we're going to break for lunch. I'll go to 3 questions, but just wanted to crystal ball with all 3 of you first whilst Nadi got a microphone out and people worked out if they had any questions for James or Wayne, so they get a word. James, where do you want to see those markets in 18 months in terms of understanding what pipeline's coming and how mature is your sector in 18 months' time based on continuity of HAF, continuity of federal government, decent consensus in kind of all of the states in a planning or a rollout sense? How far can we go?
I think probably the most important thing to achieve success, and it's the reason I asked Scott the question I did, was we need to crowd in capital into this market. Unfortunately, we saw it. I've been involved in investments in renewable energy. The creation of the Clean Energy Finance Corporation crowded out capital, and to some degree, Housing Australia has done that as well. Certainly from the banking sector, banks are saying they want to invest in this space. They want to be, they want it on page 2 of the annual report as having a positive impact. But Housing Australia's presence,
and they want to make an impact.
You're correct. Thank you for pulling me up there. So there is some crowding out that naturally occurs when government's putting its hand in its pocket. So I think a focus on crowding in, you touched on a finite pool of capital. I actually see it as it's almost infinite, the capital the institutional investors have available, and they don't want it back. That's the other beautiful thing, right? They don't want to churn their investments. They will do that opportunistically. But if you've got, as a sector, a $2.9 trillion problem in the Australian market, they don't want that money back quickly. So crowding in with these programs, I think, is one of the most important things. Crowding in private sector capital, crowding in developers, builders, and I think, very importantly, continuing only to support community housing providers. And by that I mean actual community housing providers. I don't mean community housing providers that investors establish on the side because they can access tax benefits and concessional capital. I think that's fraught with danger.
Wayne, kind of end of 2027, end of 26, I guess, where could the broader MMC kind of factory-based sector be?
Well, so our personal vision is that we will have 4 factories between Adelaide, New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland on the ground by 2030. That'll produce on a single shift around 4,500 homes per year in additional capacity into the market. We think that's important, but to the wider context, Matt, McKinsey recently released some fascinating research around 15 industries that'll change the world between now and 2045. They talked about $48 trillion in impact over that time, and modular and offsite was number 3 on that list. So we can see the technology is broadly proven in markets where they've had a burning platform for a while, like Scandinavia, where they can only build for 5 months of the year. 48% of houses are built off-site. Japan's similar. The US market has grown 800% in the last 4 years in the adoption of permanent modular. There's no reason why we can't be successful here in this space.
And just before the first question, Maria, where do you want to be at the end of next? No, where do you want the sector to be at the end of next year?
I want to be in a boat in the Mediterranean. The sector, look, I think the sector in the next couple of years needs to reform itself. The sector came out of an outsourced provider of public housing as an alternative social housing provider. It cannot be that anymore, and if any provider is out there still wanting to be that, good luck. It's not your role. Our role is to be a facilitator, to actually be the catalyst that pulls all of these pieces together and creates the ability to make it easier for capital, for the builder, for the government, for the compliance components of it, to actually bring these things together more quickly and be the stable certainty in that. And we can do that as a role. The second element to this, though, which is more important to me than, you know, this is talking about getting houses on the ground. What's more important to me than for 40 years minimum that you're going to have that housing available in high and medium density settings, being a community place manager is the most important role. Because what we lost over the years is people on the ground helping community harmonise and stay together and manage. We forgot to do that. We're so busy complying. I worked in the Housing Trust for years. I saw it happen. Everybody comes off the ground and works in head office moving paper. And now we've got a situation in public housing where we've got one FTE on the ground managing 500 properties and tenancies. Like, what do you think it doesn't work? And then we're concentrating people in housing that hasn't been invested in for so long that it's run down. Communities are run down, they're concentrated, and there's not resourcing to manage those communities. So the role of community housing is not just to put this housing on the ground, but to create an operating model that has the confidence of a large-scale investor that A, we can make a return on investment, and B, we will work in a place-managed way that is community-centric, not customer-centric, community-centric, so that you're putting the community first all the time. So no matter what's happening, that community is being cared for, regardless of the form of housing that people live in, is the most important role for community housing to get its head around, I think.
Thank you. Any questions? I'm happy to continue on, but someone want to throw their hand up? Joe.
Mr. Wayne, question for you.
G'day, Joe.
I'll put my selfish government hat on for a second and just say, government. Oh, okay, I can be louder. Government builds, X amount of houses every year. That's not that big a slice of the wedge. How does MMC, prefab, actually make inroads into the private market that builds most of the homes in Australia every year?
Yeah, so there's a couple of approaches that you can adopt in how you set up your MMC. So we've gone from, I think it's analogous to developing countries who have skipped all of the infrastructure investment into rotary telephones and push-button telephones and gone straight to cellular technology. So we're looking at that going, well, this industry needs to grow up a little bit. There's some stuff that we can do differently, so let's skip all of the build under roof language. So we're not going to have roller tables with blokes on either side, handheld tools. We're going to go straight to robots. So we're going to just do that. What does that do? It allows us to be very flexible in our approach to build form. So we don't, I think I shared this earlier with the people around the table, we're not the Henry Ford solution where you can have any colour you like as long as it's black. We are client design led. So you bring us your designs, we take them through our design for manufacture analysis, we convert that into machine language, and the robots do the rest. That allows us, through two-dimensional approaches, to be more acceptable to market, both from a cost and time and certainty, but also from a build form outcome. So you can use our technology to do fibre cement external cladding or gyprock external cladding, or you could use autoclaved aerated concrete products like Hebel on the outside. Those are completely acceptable in today's market in that space. Categorically, our focus is on more standardised approaches where we get volume of production, so we see social and affordable homes as valuable to us in that space. Not terribly interested in the model of land banking, having a display village, having some mum and dad couple come in there and go, oh, I love the blue, but I want it to be cornflower, and I need my faceplate 20 mils to the left. That's not really our space. As I said, we've committed half our capacity to this environment and to this sector because I believe there's more than enough there, Joe. And it allows us to then keep the market available, of course, but to be sensible and rational in our economic choices as well to meet our purpose.
Dr. Kate.
Thank you. I have a question for all of you, or whoever wants to take it. And it was about parliamentary, thank you, about IFM pulling their money out of funding this sector. And a lot of the commentary was about it was fear that the Liberal government was going to come in and the HAF was going to disappear. So my question is, how volatile is this scaling up at the moment to political change? Or do you think it's got enough kind of impetus behind it that it's gone now and we don't need the government to support it?
I was ropeable about that, because the thing with politics getting in the space of a crisis is that the minute the voter worries about it, they are fantastic at fucking it up, right? And so don't get me started. The Liberal government started this whole... Housing Australia came out of the Liberal government, and there was a lot of work that Community Housing did with them to take them overseas to show them those models of the new asset class and the funding model. And they came back, and the number one thing they heard, number one thing from every investor, sovereign risk. Sovereign risk. Don't play with this. It's got to be bipartisan, and you've got to hold on, because you're going to lose every investor the minute you keep going to election and say, we're going to shut it down, we're going to shut it down. Michael Sukkar come out and publicly said, I'm shutting it all down coming into the election. Thank God he lost his seat. I cheered more than that for him losing his seat than I did for the other one. So sovereign risk is they've got to get it, they've got to let us set this thing up. You've got a crisis, you've got a problem, please let us do it and stop the silliness. That's all.
Probably won't be as emotive as you, Marie, but I did touch on IFM getting there, or not getting any capital deployed. I actually don't know how much of that was just an excuse, right? That, there's political risk, so we don't want to deploy. I think there was a bit of, it's actually really small for us. But at the same time, the sooner we can get government out of the room, and that will only happen when we actually...
Not government, politics.
Politics, yep. Same thing for me. But, well, I don't think it's government without politics, right? The sooner we can get them out of the room and we can be doing this ourselves without government, the better. That's when you're going to get, billion-dollar checks coming into the Australian market like they've done in the US, like they've done in the UK. It's been done before. We just need to actually get on and work out how to do it. So, and borrow from those markets and get out of the way of private sector capital and let organisations like those represented up here actually do what they can, which are at far greater scale.
Yeah. We kind of disagree, because I think we need government for the subsidy. Like the cost, going back to my point, the cost of build and the cost of getting stuff on the ground means that we don't, the formula for not having a government subsidy is just not there. If we got there, great, but it's not, and we need a subsidy. So you always have government in the room. It's just, don't play with it, anyway.
Isn't that more about...
Let's start arguing now. I completely agree with you that there needs to be government intervention, but make it mainstream, right? Let's find a way that... NRAS was a good example. It's just it went too short, right? If you deliver a certain thing, you're going to get this. Rather than having a competition runner each time, competing against each other, right? That's where you lose a lot of interest from capital.
Yeah, even if you frame it the other way, it can't only be government in the space. Government can lead people there. Excellent. Got
Sorry,
time for...
Matt, if you don't mind, just quickly.
Sorry.
I'm not going to get in the middle of that argument. But what I would say to the good doctor is the expression that I hold dear is that this housing crisis is not a construction industry problem. It's an every industry problem. And whether you're thinking about sovereign risk, how are you going to do AUKUS if you don't have houses for people to come in and do what they need to do? And that's just one example of it. So ramping up capital, ramping up government enablement as opposed to the politics of that, ramping up supply, all important changes.
We've probably actually got time for two more, and we can go until 12:20. So if there are other questions... just want to welcome Nick Simons as well. Good to see you, Nick. Paul Sutton, Charles Sturt Council. Oh, would you like a microphone? I can do that as well.
Thanks, Matt. Maria, loved your comments about community and place-based, and I think that's really important because we've touched on a range of things through discussion. The capital part, and for me this isn't just a housing problem, the bureaucracy, the red tape is a significant part of it, and I think there's a big recalibration around even things like going back to the Adelaide City Council's presentation earlier around reuse of existing buildings, about stripping away and thinking about a risk appetite from a building compliance point of view. Not that we want to make, fire traps and things like that, but there is a piece to do there. When we then look at this not just being a housing problem, but a community problem, because a lot of the compliance is driven by people not wanting something next to them or crushing of car parking in their local streets. It leads planners into a state of anxiety, which leads to delay and things like that. So there is a piece here, I think, in sort of looking at the broader suite of what are the community aspects of this that we need to bring community along with us so that we can have denser communities that actually work from a affordability perspective.
Great question. The community bringing along, great idea. Forget it. And somebody from council, you were talking about this earlier as well, and it's like I've been in development long enough that it's self-interest, right? And there's this thing called greater good that conflicts with self-interest, and sometimes you've got to be brave to actually go for the greater good despite the self-interest, because the NIMBYs have been here forever. If we did listen to every single one, we have a bigger housing crisis now. So I'm always about saying, yes, you've got to do everything that's reasonable and practicable and whatever you can to educate community, yes, and maybe we can do that better and do more. But what I've learned over the years is I can talk to community, and I have. Like, I've actually been door knocking, sat at table by table by table by table in areas when I wanted to get a development in, doing my hardest to bring them along. And that's where the time goes. This is Australia, right? It's all this time we have to get the community along. Didn't matter what I said. No, not. I agree with what you're doing. It's great. I understand the problem. Not here. Like, oh, okay. Well, not anywhere. We'll go to the middle of Australia. So I think over the years, what I've seen is it's about being brave, and it's about pushing through, and it's about doing. Not making everybody happy, but making sure you're getting it right. I think around affordability, it's not just about the price, it is location. The location is what helps your affordable living. It is providing buildings that have a whole bunch of other things that help with affordability in your living, so that the price of the housing is relative to all those things. Guess what? They're in locations that, they want us to keep going out and out and out. We know that with infrastructure, the problem we've got with infrastructure is this city is too far spread. You look at efficient cities around the world, they're not spread like this with the number of people we have. So for us to be able to afford all that infrastructure as we keep going out, we keep making things more unaffordable. But we can't bring it in because, Joe Bloggs, who had all the bells and whistles next door, that he got his house because he got everything for free, won't let anyone else live near him. Oh, fuck off. Do you know?
On that mild note.
On that wild note. No, but I think it's about balancing. Do what you can, but let's not get so strangled by this stuff, because that's what we are in this country. When I worked in government, this is what happens with public. They're bipolar. Do something, I don't trust you. Do something, I don't trust you. Why do you think we're so compliant? It sits with that lack of trust, or do something, not near me. That's what gets out of control in this country. That's why our productivity is becoming such a problem, in my view.
In closing and thanking our wonderful panellists, I just wanted to add, in a broader sector thing, I think one of the huge opportunities here, and we'll talk about this afternoon, it's impossible to prove a negative in community engagement. And I think until we've built something to show that it is supported, it's even a harder community conversation to have. And I think Common Ground's a very good example of that the fear of what Common Ground was before it was what it was and was successful. I think there's people need to see it, touch it, feel it before they understand it, and in an MMC sense as well. So on that note, I won't keep anyone else from their lunch any longer, would like to thank our three wonderful panellists. Thank all of you, and see you after lunch.